really learned about contemplating death. We don't want to do that in the Western world. I've spent a lot of time in the East, in the Orient, and that's kind of in your face there. And there's some value in that, because we need to see that life is really short and impermanent, so that we're evaluating how we want to spend our lives. So that encounter with death, that what appeared as an entity to me was good for me. Like I see that I'm indebted to that little visit from death to say, hey, how do you want to live your life? Are you living it well? Because it's really short. And so living those dreams has also been a driving factor for me, because I realize the mind can help me realize those dreams, but I wouldn't maybe go after them if I didn't know how precious life was.
Hello, beautiful people. On today's podcast, we have the beautiful Jean Muenchrath. Jean had a 30-plus year career as a park ranger for the US National Park Service. She is the Amazon best-selling author of her book, If I Live Until Morning, which is about a wilderness adventure that took her skiing more than 200 miles along California's John Muir Trail, where she came to face death from a mountaineering accident on Mount Whitney. What I personally love about this conversation is Jean's openness and candidness in laying it all out for us to learn the lessons she has embodied from this defining moment in her life at the young age of 22. We talk about the power of the mind and how setting her intention to live out her dreams when she was on the cusp of death is what kept her alive. Jean went on to live these dreams and shares how she probably wouldn't have if it weren't for her to not understand the shortness of life. We discuss the power of self-forgiveness, how it is important to find your voice in your journey of healing, and how stepping outside of yourself with compassion and loving kindness will always help you maintain perspective and lead to fulfillment. Please enjoy this conversation of wisdom with the lovely Jean. So Jean, where I would love to start is with a quote from your book, If I Live Until Morning. These mountains give me an appreciation for the human spirit's capacity for enduring hardship. So where I would love to start with you is, obviously throughout your life, you have experienced enduring hardship. So I would love for you to share more about your 200-mile expedition on the John Muir Trail, and how that essentially came to change the trajectory of your life.
Indeed, it did change.
It did.
So I was 22 years of age when I set out on this expedition with my then boyfriend, Ken, and we were skiing 220-ish miles. So this trail goes through the mountains of the Sierra Nevadas in California, from Yosemite National Park down to Mount Whitney, which is the highest peak in the lower 48 states. And we were skiing this on, not your ordinary skis, I wanted to show you, narrow skis, cross-country skis, no metal edges, 3-pin bindings, and boots that are more like tennis shoes.
Wow.
Okay. So this is really rugged terrain. We in total skied up and crossed 14 high passes between 10 and 13,500 feet. I'm sorry, I don't have that in meters for your listeners. And that meant gaining 48,000 vertical feet over the course of several weeks and descending 44,000 feet. So this is a very arduous journey. We trained and we planned for years. And we also had to pre-load food on like a month. Well, it was a month is what we allowed for the trip. And we basically had these big white plastic drums at the kind of kitchens and restaurants get, and we filled that up with a week's worth of food at a time. And then we had to ski these drums into the mountains. So they'd be placed a week apart, and literally wire them up into trees so the animals wouldn't get to seal them, and put a note on it like, don't take this food, our life depends on it. And of course, there weren't GPS units and things back, this is 82. And so, we had to really make sure we could get to the right tree at the right place to find our food. And so the ski trip itself, I have to say, was marvelous. I
Wow.
mean, it was a great time. The scenery, it's really rugged. It's stupendous mountains, just some of the most beautiful mountains on this earth. And we had generally good skiing conditions. We did have to delay our trip by a month because of severe avalanche conditions. That year, the snowpack was 225% above normal.
Wow.
So that was a concern. And we certainly dealt with a lot of avalanche debris. And we had challenges along the way, like sometimes our skis came off our feet and we had to go find them, down at the bottom of the valley. There were times we sank into streams, but they were small streams, so it wasn't real threatening. We definitely had this problem of rotten snow where you'd be skiing along, trying to read the landscape, and all of a sudden, like, you couldn't tell the difference in the snow, where you just collapsed literally to your waist.
Wow.
And you're trying to dig your skis out. And then you'd get up, you'd get out, and then you'd go 50 feet and you'd do this again and again. So, there were a lot of challenges, and the avalanche debris that had already come down was these blocks of chunks of snow and tree trunks. And so crossing that on these skinny skis. And then my partner, Ken, did actually break a ski 40 miles from the end of our trip. And so we had to strap those together and make this work. So full of challenge, but overall it was full of beauty and adventure. And it was really wondrous. I like to call it two things, a grand and regrettable adventure or a wild and wonder-filled catastrophe, because the trip was good. Then we got to what was supposed to be the last day of the trip. And we were climbing Mount Whitney, which is, again, the highest peak in the lower 48. And so that's 14,500 feet. And again, I'm sorry, I don't have the meters on hand, but quite tall. And we climbed it very easily because we were super fit. It's the end of this marvelous, trip of high exertion. And when we got to the top, this storm was building quickly, very quickly. And it started to lightning and snow. And, we're, again, on the highest peak in the lower 48. This is the last place you should be in a lightning storm. So we had to make a decision quickly on how to get down. And our plan was to take the summer route down the east face and then out, and that'd be it. But to do that, we would head into the storm on this ridge that goes on for a couple of miles. And so we went down a shorter, doable route, which was the north face. And perhaps that was the start of the first of many bad decisions. And anyway, we went down. And so I want to clarify for your listeners, we were not skiing down the mountain. We were down climbing, So what that meant, we had ice axes with us, and we were literally hanging on our ice axes. All of my weight, my skis are tied to my pack. I have a 35-pound pack on, and all of that is hanging onto a half an inch into the snow with my ice axe. And so it's very steep. But Ken, my partner, he actually changed positions into what's called a sitting glissade, and he hit ice and whizzed down the mountain out of sight. He fell 800 feet.
Wow.
Truly miraculous that he survived. Meanwhile, I didn't know where he was. He was out of my sight. I was in a really fearful place. And I knew that I had to concentrate like I never have my entire life, because everything depended on that focus to get down. So I continued down very slowly, ultimately got down. He came up, we met, and then we kind of headed down together. And then the storm got worse again. And it's kind of approaching twilight now. And so because he had fallen down the mountain and then come partially back up, he knew his way around a little bit, right? So he left his backpack at the base of these cliffs that he sailed over and kind of worked his way up. And then when we went down, the way we wanted to go, we couldn't go because things were icing up more. And so he down climbed this, 20 feet section, not very much, right? To get to this ledge that would traverse over and bypass these cliffs. So that was the plan. And to own my error, because I think it's really important in life not to blame others. There's all these factors that come into things that happen to us. But I did make a choice, and I own that choice. Well, if he could down climb, this is what was going through my mind. Why can't I? I'm fit, I'm strong, da 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 da. And we were rock climbers too. So anyway, I did not wait for him to get the rope and come back up. And now I'm down climbing this lousy 20 feet. Anyway, I get to a point where I can't hang on. I can't go up, I can't go down, because I didn't calculate. I'm wearing 35 pounds on my back. He didn't have a backpack on. I'm shorter and smaller. I can't reach the same holds. It's the end of the day, I'm tired, all of those things. And so I fell. And I remember very clearly the moment I fell, or the moment leading to the fall, because I had the thought bubble, my inner voice, it said, God, don't let me fall. And then the world went black. I mean, I was unconscious, but I wasn't. It's hard to describe. I was, the world went dark, and I heard my ice axe, my pack, my body going bang, bang, bang on the rocks, but I couldn't see anything, and I felt zero pain. It was really strange. Wow. And then I fell somewhere between 150 to 165 feet, which I didn't think it was that far till years later when, Google Earth came on the scene and I could measure all that. And so then Ken dragged me across the snow and set up the tent. And we were in that tent for 2.5 days or so. And basically the tent I called the coffin, because it was a really tiny tent, a mountaineering tent. And we were kind of trapped there because the storm was really bad and kind of worried about the snow building up and avalanche danger. And I knew I was really injured. I mean, there was blood everywhere. And so to kind of get to your story, I laid in the tent for a couple of days, and I really didn't talk to Ken very much unless we were plotting our survival, like how are we going to get out alive kind of thing. And most of the time I had this mantra that just rose up from my gut, and it was, I'm going to live. I'm going to live. I'm going to live. And I said that silently, internally, for 2 straight days. Amazing. Unless I was talking to Ken or I was sleeping. I had to believe I could do this because the odds were really against me. And anyway, so when the storm subsided, we made the decision we had to self-evacuate. Again, it's 1982. There's no cell phones. There's no GPS, emergency locator beacons. We were a week ahead of schedule. So even though our family had our itinerary, well, we were a week ahead of schedule. So there you go. So my injuries, to give your listeners a sense of what I'm dealing with. I had a head injury, which was minor in the scheme of things. And basically everything below my backpack fractured. So I broke on my thoracic spine, T12, my lumbar spine, L1, L2, L5, my sacrum, the kind of cornerstone of your pelvis, 3 pieces. My tailbone was in smithereens, as the doctors said. And I had a massive injury to my left buttock, to the point where it's bleeding both externally, internally, and that developed into gangrene. So the lower third of one of my buttocks, if you can imagine. So you don't realize, nobody appreciates their butt, but let me tell you how important your butt is. Just your movement and functioning in life, when people say their butt's too fat, I'm like, I'll take some of it, But anyway, so this terrible tissue that was necrotic, and if it didn't get resolved, it was going to kill me. And then on top of that, I had nerve damage. So I got some nerve damage to the back of my thigh, but more importantly in the moment is, I hope this isn't too much information, but I had damage to my bladder. It's the only way I could pee, and I could hardly pee for 5 days. So you want to talk about agony, that is truly agony, is to push. And that's still the case today. So I have that nerve damage, but that was just all really hard. So now we're trying to evacuate through hip deep snow. We don't have our skis anymore. Oh, and there was a possible fracture when I got to the hospital. They said of my pubic bone and my right hip, which they never followed up on. But actually, I just had an MRI, and my chiropractor said, oh yeah, you did have a fracture in your right hip. I can see it right here. So anyway, that's what I'm dealing with, trying to get out. So from the day we fell on the mountain until we were in a hospital was 5 days of either laying on the mountain or several days trying to self-evacuate, and very rugged terrain, and I basically, the title of my book, If I Live Until Morning, comes from that first night right after my accident, I'm laying in this tent, I'm bleeding everywhere, it's dark, and I'm sensing this presence. And you'll notice in my book, I put it with a capital D for death. It felt like an entity. And I felt it like right over me. And I knew I might die, but I also knew I couldn't fight it. It was kind of peaceful, actually. It wasn't scary in the moment. Like when we're threatened with death in a normal everyday basis, we all like and get all uptight about it. But I was just whatever. I mean, it's going to be, I can't control that. And then I think that's what gave rise to the mantra the next day. But as I'm laying there, right before I fell asleep, I was very alert. And I remember having the thought, if I live until morning, hence the name of my book, I will live my greatest dreams. And so that was my driving factor when I was trying to get out. I'm sinking in deep snow. I'm not sure I'm going to make it. I'm not sure I'm going to get paralyzed at any moment. Whenever I didn't think I could make it, I would just think of my dreams. You know, I'm 22. I have a life ahead of me, I hope. And I was going to give it my all because I wanted to live my dreams. So that was what started this hardship in my life, because obviously I've lived with these effects for a long time, which I'm sure we'll go into more.
We will. I would love to sort of dive deeper into this with you, because I feel like these like two key factors of having this mantra that, you know, I want to live, and then making this vow that I will live my greatest dreams. Personally, in reading your story, I feel like we're just so profoundly impactful for you sort of, you know, getting out of this 5-day survival story. Can you share more about what you've learned through this experience about the power of the mind?
That is the single most thing I've learned, is that the mind it's everything. It is so powerful. And I'm not just saying that you can just, wave your mind like a magic wand and make things happen, but it is amazing what you can manifest. And, I shouldn't have survived. I mean, every doctor's told me that you shouldn't be alive and you sure shouldn't be able to walk, Yeah. So I believe it increased my odds tremendously. I set this intention, what I'm going to do. But it's not just a matter of setting the intention, it's also trying to actually follow through on what you plan to do. And I've learned throughout my whole life, if it wasn't for my mind, I wouldn't have gotten off Mount Whitney. I wouldn't have gotten through 18 years of chronic pain. I wouldn't have gotten through the loss of my loved ones, which I got in the book. The divorce. I mean, just everything is about the mind, and it's how we not only apply ourselves, but it's how we interpret things. So that's a big part of kind of where I'm coming from in being human. Is every day we're making choices and we're perceiving this world around us. It's beauty, it's ugliness, it's suffering, all this package deal. But it's how we interpret ourselves and what's happening to us in the world that changes the experiences that we're having. And so that's where I think the mind is everything. So that was kind of the basis of what I learned. But I did learn other things. I learned about cultivating courage and perseverance and not giving up, because so often it'd be easy to give up. And that's important. And I've really learned about contemplating death. We don't want to do that in the Western world. I've spent a lot of time in the East, in the Orient, and that's kind of in your face there. And there's some value in that, because we need to see that life is really short and impermanent, so that we're evaluating how we want to spend our lives. So that encounter with death, that what appeared as an entity to me was good for me. Like I see that I'm indebted to that little visit from death to say, hey, how do you want to live your life? Are you living it well? Because it's really short. And so living those dreams has also been a driving factor for me, because I realize the mind can help me realize those dreams, but I wouldn't maybe go after them if I didn't know how precious life was.
Yeah. And one of your greatest dreams was to go to the Himalayas, and that was certainly something that pulled you through as well. And you did get to live that dream. Can you share more about coming almost full circle to that moment that really pulled you through that sort of life and death situation?
I mean, when I was actually in Nepal or more kind of leading up to it?
I think in actually being in Nepal, because I know that in your story you sort of share like this moment of realization that you actually got to the point of this kind of like image, I guess, that you were thinking in these really like hard moments. And then all of a sudden, like you were there
Yeah.
and you were alive.
Yeah. So when I was trying to self-evacuate from Mount Whitney, I did have images of the Himalayas coming to mind. And some of those were actually planned by a professor who turned into a life mentor of mine. So I'd seen his pictures, so I actually did have images in my mind of specific mountains. And in that time, I was thinking of Kala to Patar, which is a very popular trekking destination in the Everest region. Lots of people have been there. And I would envision myself there. And so then when I actually stood on that little summit and I'm looking at the sunset on Everest, I remember the people around me were kind of in the party mode, and I was jovial inside, like there was this deep inner joy, but it wasn't this free-for-all kind of fun-loving, carefree party. I mean, I had this wow moment. I'm here, like I made it, I'm alive, I'm realizing this dream that kept me alive, and got me through a lot of hardship to even get there. And it was just a beautiful moment. But I do remember stepping aside from the crowd. I had dark glacier goggles on because of the intense light at over 18,000 feet. And I remember I was crying. You wouldn't have known it as such, but my eyes were just wet because it was a crying of joy, but I wasn't in a place where I wanted to share that with these people. And I stepped aside because it was such a private moment for me. And then I didn't want to go down if the sun hadn't set, and got to 0 degrees Fahrenheit that night. And so it was like, well, I have to go down, but I just wanted to stay there. That was the moment I had lived for, It was really special.
Yeah, it sounds absolutely beautiful. I would love to sort of lean more into your healing journey, because in sort of reading your story, what really stood out for me was kind of this idea of how do you heal when you feel like you can't completely restore yourself?
Yeah, that was something I really struggled with, because I think so often most people embrace the idea of healing as going back to the way it was, right? Okay, I'm fully healed.
Yeah.
And that's just not based in reality. Maybe it is for some minor injuries or things like that. But, our body is changing, and our minds every day. We're making new cells, and we're changing based on the experiences that we have. And so it's not a matter of just kind of putting Humpty Dumpty back together again, and maybe you won't see the cracks, right? But we think that because I think we want that deep in our hearts. We want to heal that way. And when I finally actually started writing my book, that's when I started analyzing, what does it mean to heal? Because I too wanted my old Jean back, and it wasn't possible. And do I really want that? I mean, part of, sure, I'd love to have that intact, healthy, fit 22-year-old body, but no, I'm 63 almost now, and that's just not going to happen. So, so I think it's good to treasure the health that we have and to move forward prizing the health that we can maintain. But I realized in trying to be whole that it wasn't just about the body. You need to make the body as fit and strong and able to do things based on whatever you're dealing with, but also healing emotionally and spiritually, that these all have to come together to make us a whole person. And I think part of the problem was I, like many people, was defining healing not only based on what it would have been in the past, but I was defining it based on the image I had of what I wanted that may or may not be possible. And so when I realized that healing is about how I perceive myself, if the only way I'm whole is to not have broken bones and a big scar across my butt, and then I'll never be whole. What is a whole person is bigger and deeper than that.
Mm.
It's, again, I think a lot of it is our mind, and it's our inner spirit that defines us as people. It's not that, you might have blonde hair and I have dark hair, or dark skin, or this or that, or blue eyes. We're all humans, and it's the spirit that we carry.
Beautiful.
That defines who we are and how we are in the world. And so that, by healing that part of me, and those three parts of me, my body and my mind and my spirit and emotions, that's what makes you whole. You're not defined by one part of you. We're bigger than that.
Yeah. And you've lived with chronic pain. I'm interested to know, how do you balance living with chronic pain almost as a reminder of what's happened, but also, as you're suggesting, having sort of this beautiful gift of facing death and truly appreciating life for what it is, and being the adventurous spirit that you are? What has that been like for you in that balance?
Well, I think it's, I've had a lot of ups and downs my whole life.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I'm able to be more active than other times. And I did have like 18 years of really bad chronic pain, and just kind of searching for solutions. Most of the time that was searching outwardly for solutions, which has its benefit, because different practitioners can help you in different ways. So I think you do gain things for that. And I've had some really down and out dark moments. But I think it goes back again to understanding how powerful the mind is, so I can choose, okay, I'm going to be a victim. Maybe I want to blame somebody else, and maybe it is somebody else's fault, but is it 100% if that was the circumstance? Because, it takes two or three, it takes all these forces in the universe to come together. And so being a victim, or blaming others, or always feeling sorry for myself. And I've had my moments of feeling truly sorry for myself.
Yeah.
But that isn't productive. It keeps you trapped in that mindset. And that mindset is actually adding layers of additional suffering on top of what you already have. You don't need to do that. You have enough suffering. So I think learning to work with that, and kind of separate yourself from that, and to figure out how can I take this negative circumstance, this pain, these things I don't want. Pushing them away doesn't make them go away. We try to hide our skeletons in the closet. We try not to talk about our things. We put on our happy face, but they still come back. You can't run from yourself, and you cannot run from the shadows in your past that are going to follow you. So I think the thing to do, from what I've learned, is to turn around, face the shadow, give it a hug, make friends with it, own it, and figure out, how can I take this thing I don't want and make it a positive experience? So it still won't be what I want. It's not going to go away, but actually its power decreases by facing it and figuring out a way to turn it into something better, benefit others with it. Or something I've done a lot is, when I'm in a place of pain or difficulty, it's easy to go, oh, poor me, this only happens to me. But it doesn't. Stop. Think of all the suffering that's going on this very moment. There's people in Ukraine that can't get food, they can't get medicine, they can't get water. There's people in cancer clinics. There's people that just got in a car accident. I mean, there's a lot of suffering going on. You're not alone. And so when I can think about that and actually extend my compassion out to those people, suddenly I feel better. Because I'm not alone. I'm aware that I'm part of this human race that has to deal with stuff, but I can change my outlook and my perception, and then it's not as bad. Again, I've removed some of those layers that have added to my pain, and now I can sit with it a lot better.
And how important has self-forgiveness been for you?
Really important. So that was the interesting thing, as I was searching to heal myself, a million doctors, a million this and that, and then I went to a trauma therapist, and I was really trying a lot of things, and I'm really good at forgiving others. I think in the West, we're not so good about forgiving ourselves.
Mm.
And I didn't even realize I needed to forgive myself. I mean, I hated
Wow.
myself for what I did. You know, how did you do this to yourself? You're living, been 40 years now since this accident. And I'm still living with the effects, but I didn't know until I went back to Mount Whitney. That was in 2013, that I hadn't forgiven myself. I was there. I was looking for my skis, actually. I found Ken's broken ski and the heel of my boot and a variety of things. But I stood there and I'm literally standing on the campsite where I should have died. I'm not sure I want to call it a campsite because it wasn't quite a campsite. But anyway, on the side of the mountain. And I'm looking up at the cliffs where I fell. And I just bawled. I bawled harder than I think I ever have, which was cathartic. But as I was walking around that base of that area, that's when it clicked. You haven't forgiven yourself. You still resent yourself for this decision you made. Like, get over it. Forgive yourself. You're a human being. You were 22. It was getting dark. You had low blood sugar. You did the best you can in the moment. It wasn't the best choice, but in the moment it felt like it. And so I think, we all, every day we're making decisions, and sometimes those have huge consequences, both positive or, implications for our life. But just forgiving ourselves, because everybody does the best they can. I really believe that we try to do the best we can in a given moment. And, we've all done things like, ooh, I shouldn't have said that, or shouldn't have done that. You can't always take it back. You can try and soften it or whatever and move forward. But self-forgiveness is healing. And so I don't hate myself anymore. It's like, well, did the best I can. And now all I can do is go forward, because again, if I don't forgive myself, I'm living in the past, right? That's just not productive. It doesn't allow me to. So forgiveness is great.
And after this accident, your partner at the time, Ken, kind of requested that you do not share your experience and you do not share your story. And obviously now, as we're speaking about, you've written a book. How important has being able to share your story been in your healing process?
It's been huge. I did honor that wish. Again, something I shouldn't have done, but that's water under the bridge at this point. We all do different things to maintain relationships or circumstances. And later we go, well, that wasn't such a good idea. Anyway, that's past. So I wrote the book, and I just realized that in that writing process, I actually started learning a lot about myself and about kind of what happened. Like, I put pieces of a puzzle together that were always just kind of floating around. And I also realized that I found my voice. So like I could have gotten more input on the book. I got help with editing, and that was all, but it was more editing with grammar and punctuation and things, because I was very emphatic about this has to be in my words and in my voice, because this is my story, and it's the story that's been bottled up in secret. Jean just had these mysterious back problems. That's all our friends knew. Why did you have back problems? You're so young, right? But releasing that was, again, cathartic. I found my voice. The more I talk about it, the easier it is. So that's my advice for people that have challenges. Get out with it. You don't have to share too much information or every information, but start to share at least with people you can trust. And the more you are able to do that, you release that. You don't hold it in, and then it's this tiger pacing inside you. That's this stress that, again, you can't keep it down. It's just going to keep rising. So why not release it? And it's been great, and I'm fine with it. And I feel that that's been an opportunity, not just for me to heal that part of it, but also, I've gotten a lot of feedback from readers that's helped them, and so, tell your story. We all have stories that define us, and that's what makes us human. You have your story, I have my story, and together we have these beautiful stories that overlap, and that's part of the excitement of the universe that we live in. So it was very healing.
And you're very passionate about Eastern philosophy. I feel like this experience has certainly kind of put you on that path of exploring these beautiful teachings and lessons and immersing yourself in them. For any of the listeners, and I would say there's probably all of us that are experiencing some form of adversity in our life at the moment, what do you feel like is a teaching that you kind of pull on as a daily practice that helps you?
Oh, there's so many possibilities. I think a really good one is to try to step outside of ourselves. And the way to do that is truly to think about others. Or if you can't think about others, just go outside on the street, or bring up a newspaper and then close it and pick one article, and think about the complexity of what that person is dealing with. And I just think that gives us so much perspective. But I also think even just sitting quietly with the feelings that we have, you don't have to act on them. If you're feeling angry or sad, just experiencing them. I mean, it is important to release them. Again, you don't want to bottle that up, but just feel, oh, I'm feeling really sad. And it's okay to feel sad. And there are other people that might feel that way. And, send out an intention. It doesn't mean you don't have to pray or anything, but we can all wish that others have the happiness they deserve and that they're not suffering. I think a beautiful meditation practice that's taught, I won't go into a lot of details because it's kind of complex, but a simple version is simply like I'm talking to you right now, and you are a human being, so you have your own issues. You just have to. That's inherent. Okay. So do I. And I can just think of that you might be suffering and look at you and hold you literally in my heart and breathe in my imagination, like whatever you're dealing with that's negative. I can visualize it as a black air or green air, whatever. Breathe it in and transform it in my heart, and breathe out in my mind and send you some pure light. I can do that for myself too. I can go out to nature and see a mountain or a tree or a waterfall, something that gives me a good feeling, and just imagine I'm breathing in that river or breathing in the tree or the strength of the mountain and giving that to myself. And I've found that can be very helpful, and it can be helpful to other people. You don't have to have any religious beliefs around that. You can just, you feel the negative ions of a beautiful creek. You just do. It feels good, or the sun on your face. Breathe it in. It's healing, so that way you also you're becoming one with something else. You're not just you, because then you start to feel alone and shut down. But I think when we can open up and receive, we're in a better place.
Thank you for sharing that beautiful practice. And thank you for sharing your story, Jean. I truly mean it. I'm so grateful that you've been able to have the opportunity and space and courage to share your story. It was a beautiful one to read. It was certainly vulnerable and very raw, and I very much appreciate that. There were many levels that I connected with you on, and certainly lessons that I'm going to apply in my own life. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. I wanted it to be raw, vulnerable, and as honest as I could be, just because I think that's an important way to live our lives and to speak of our lives.
Yeah, I really felt that. So on a final note, Jean, I would love to ask you, what does it mean to you to be human?
Well, we've talked about a lot of different things, and a lot of people certainly think about, the suffering that people have and all of the vulnerability, those types of things. And certainly that's part of life. But to me, it's bigger than that. To be human is to be a vessel that possesses immense potential.
Beautiful.
Because I think we as a species, we can dream. We can analyze things. We can make choices and plans, and we can take action. And that's truly unique to being human. But I think on a bigger level, the potential that we have, that we can realize, is based on, again, how we perceive ourselves and the world we live in. Because I can choose in any moment, again, I can be a victim or I can be somebody that's rising above. I make that choice. How do I perceive myself? Capable or not capable? There's a whole host of how I can do that. And how do I perceive the world around me? Is it out to get me or is it out to help me? And those interpretations and perceptions, I believe, are really critical to the human experience. And that's what defines our reality from day-to-day existence and our interactions with others. So to me, to be human is to be full of potential, and it's how we want to use that potential.